for the keynote address here at the inauguration of NITC 2014. Please welcome the Secretary General, Commonwealth Telecommunication Organization, Professor Tim Unwin.
Chief Guest, the Honourable Dr. Sarata Munagama, Senior Minister of International Financial Affairs and Deputy Minister in the Finance and Planning, Honourable Minister ICT, Ranjit Sia Balapitiya, Honourable Minister Science and Technology, Champika Ranawaka, my previous speakers, Gotabaya Jayaratne, Secretary Minister of Telecommunication and ITT, Anthony Ming, Special Advisor to the Commonwealth Secretary General Kamala Sharma, Tim Gressinger, Vice President IBM Asia Pacific, Reshan Devapura, CEO of ICTA, and Ajit Salgado, President of CCSL. May I take this opportunity to recognize two other people in the audience, particularly His Excellency Dr. Chris Nonis, a High Commissioner for Sri Lanka at the Court of St. James in London. He has been a marvelous advocate of everything that is good in Sri Lanka, and didn't need to persuade me to come here, but whenever I hear him speak, he persuades everybody in the audience to come to your wonderful country. And may I recognize also my very dear friend, Anusha Palpita, Director General of TRCL, who is on the Executive Committee of the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization. And if it hadn't been for Sri Lanka, I would not be the Secretary General of the CTO. So I owe you a debt of thanks. I hope what I have to say to you today and tomorrow morning will make up for that. As I've hinted, you've asked me to speak tomorrow as well, and I was juggling what I would say now and what I would say tomorrow. And I thought probably since we have more dignitaries here this afternoon, I should be more polite this afternoon and get down to a bit more of the nitty-gritty tomorrow morning. But distinguished colleagues, eminent scientists, people of Sri Lanka, it is indeed a great privilege to give you this short address today. First, let me reiterate how very good it is to be returning once more to Sri Lanka. My one regret is that this time I didn't bring my wife with me. However, the warmth and generosity of the people of Sri Lanka is visible immediately you get on one of the aeroplanes that one of the partners, Sri Lankan Airlines, to this conference. I was elsewhere in the Commonwealth last week, and I can assure you that the quality of service they provide welcomes you to Sri Lanka immediately you get onto the aeroplane. So I was very grateful for being able to get some sleep on the plane coming here. But your country has a rich, a diverse, indeed a stunning cultural and natural heritage. One needs only think of the rock city above Sigiriya and the marvelous paintings on the walls, the leopards in Yala, and the wonderful cricket expertise that you have in this country. But you can see, coming back time and again, the enormous changes that are taking place, the development of new smart cities, the continual construction work here in Colombo. So I'm very grateful indeed to this opportunity to be with such wonderful people again. It's also particularly nice for me to be here at the 32nd National Information Technology Conference convened by the Computer Society of Sri Lanka. How the world has changed from when 40 years ago I wrote programs in Fortran. I could look around the audience, I can see that most people don't even know what that was like, but you had a deck of cards that you had to put into the huge machine, rather the size of that banner. And you'd make one printing mistake on the card and you got it wrong, and you had to run the whole thing again next day. Today, I could be with you 40 years later. Probably you can't see it because it is so tiny. But the world of Raspberry Pis and an amazing change in technology. And I know that people from Sri Lanka have been making huge progress in that. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment or two. But as the very generous and kind welcome to me said a short while ago, I feel that I'm here amongst this community in two roles. Yes, perhaps most prominently as Secretary General of the CTO, which I've been since 2011, and indeed am now entering the last year of my term of office. That means I'm even more energetic and even more enthusiastic, so I've only got another year to make the changes that I want to make. But I'm also here as chair of the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission in the United Kingdom. And it's been a huge privilege to have that role, because through it, I've met literally thousands of young people and not so young people from across the Commonwealth. And I've always been immensely impressed by the quality of the science, the pursuit of intellectual curiosity, and indeed the depth and rigor of the scientific community here in Sri Lanka. And I want to pay tribute to that. I think your higher education system is turning out people of the highest capacity, and it is wonderful to be with you. I know there are some of our alumni in the audience as well. And I would like also to congratulate you because there is a little more colour in this gathering than I often see in other parts of the Commonwealth. Because amongst the scholars and fellows that I see from your country, not quite enough, but there are larger numbers of women. And it's good to see so many women in an event that's largely for computer scientists and the computer society. My own younger daughter is the one who is teaching me to program in Python on my Raspberry Pi. She is the only English student who's just completed her year of a degree in mechanical engineering at one of Britain's top universities. We have to do more about this gender balance. Before I get into the main part of what I want to say, I would like to follow up a little bit on what Tony Ming said in his message from the Commonwealth Secretary General Kamalesh Sharma, and that is the Commonwealth matters. Sri Lanka has played a key role in the Commonwealth in recent years, and I was delighted to be able to be at the Heads of Government meeting here not so long ago. The Commonwealth matters, and I will say why it matters in much more detail tomorrow. But it matters in essence, if you take one thing away from what I have to say now, because it is about the common good. It is not about individual greed. It's not about individual exercise. But it is about what we can do for each other. And I hope that these next few days will be about how we can learn more from each other, about how we can work together in making the Commonwealth indeed a better place through the use of ICTs for inclusive development. As I've touched on my own computing past, you might think, particularly if you're here tomorrow, that I have some concerns about computer science. So I want to make it absolutely clear before I say what I will say next, that I care passionately about technology. I care about its transformative ability. I just enjoy it. I may not necessarily look like a geek, or as I get older with my assistive technology, perhaps I become more geek-like. But I love the purity of the mathematics and the engineering that makes some of this kit. Which is why it saddens me, it does, that we have not done more with it. And that is my challenge for you. ICTs have transformed the lives of billions of people across the world over the last quarter of a century. And we've had some wonderful examples, particularly of smart cities and the video that we had with that pumping energy music to begin with, to show the wonders of ICTs and how they are indeed making this world a better place. They've enabled access to huge amounts of information at the touch of a button, something we couldn't dream ago when I was a student. They enable instantaneous communication with people across the world every second or nanosecond of the day. They have indeed transformed commercial practices, not least through mobile banking and borderless financial transactions. So yes, 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 ICTs are transforming the world for the better for most people, but not all people. And that is why this conference is about ICTs for inclusive development. Such opportunities are only available to those who have access to appropriate devices and networks, and who know best how to use them in serving their interests and the communal interests of which they are a part. Likewise, we mustn't forget that this dramatic digital transformation has opened up new possibilities for criminal activity, which is why initiatives such as the Commonwealth Cybercrime Initiative that Tony has been playing such an active part in are indeed so important. As indeed is our own work in the CTO on the wider issues around cybersecurity and the governance of the internet. ICTs, the data that we've heard so much about, the cloud that we're going to hear more about, raises fundamental questions about the balance of rights and of responsibilities between citizens and states and companies over notions such as privacy and freedom. We have to consider those. And again, a little bit more before I conclude. My point here, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is both a dark side to ICTs, as well as the much more usually articulated, brilliant, good, modern, wonderful side. We cannot pretend that it doesn't exist, and we must do something about it. Sri Lanka's, your national ITC conference has been a flagship initiative of the Computer Society of Sri Lanka since the origins of the conference way back in 1982. Indeed, the work of the CCSL has been behind many of the most innovative initiatives that have been developed in Sri Lanka in recent years that have encouraged the use of ICTs for the betterment of all peoples in this country. And so I very, very much welcome the theme of this year's event on growth with equity, growth and equity, inclusive development. And I'm here not to give keynote addresses, but to learn more from you about the latest developments in research and practice here amongst the computer scientists and those working in the field. And I'm delighted, and on behalf of the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization, privileged that we will be holding a critical information infrastructure protection workshop as a special track at the conference. And this will be led mainly by my colleague, Dr. Martin Koyabi. Don't let me put you off, he is really brilliant. So to turn to that theme of inclusive development. Inclusive development, if it means anything, means about enabling everyone to benefit from the undoubted potential of ICTs to transform lives for the better. But the sad thing is, the reality is, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, that to date, the usage of ICTs has actually increased the inequalities between rich and poor in our villages, in our towns, in our countries, in the Commonwealth, more widely in the world. In the UK, where we're moving to a digital by default environment, 15% of households don't have access to the internet. The more we move with our government to that digital by default, the more we will marginalize those people who, for whatever reasons, do not, cannot, or want not to participate. My own personal interests for many years have been in finding ways through which we can work with people with disabilities. People with more disabilities have vastly more to gain from the use of ICTs in transforming their lives than those of us who have fewer disabilities. And I will say more about that tomorrow. But also with out-of-school young people, with street children across the world. And I was privileged recently to be at a workshop in the Caribbean where we worked with a group of young people bringing Commonwealth bodies together to explore ways through which they can use ICTs to get the skills that will take them off the streets, that will take them away from knives and guns and drugs. Maybe, but it is a very long haul to get there. My point here, ladies and gentlemen, is that if we do not work with the poorest, with the most marginalized, then we've failed in our responsibilities and duties as human beings. Now, I know that argument doesn't often gain traction, but when you say that enabling them to transform their lives through ICTs can contribute value to the economy, then ministers of finance and economy listen, because instead of being a drain on the economy, they become an asset to the economy. So in drawing to an end, let me offer you 5 important themes about inclusion. And I've tried to make these a little different from those that I'm going to advocate tomorrow. But the first is, if we're going to do anything about inclusion, there must be closer collaboration. Collaboration between government departments. One of the pieces of work we've been doing in the ITU's Empowering Development Initiative has been to recognize that far too often government departments act in silos. And if we're going to use mobile devices to contribute effectively to development, one of the easiest things to do is just to get different government departments talking together. So it is wonderful to have 3 ministers with us this evening and other important dignitaries from other government departments here. But it's not just within government, it's between government and the private sector, but also civil society. We must move away from the old rhetoric of failed public-private partnerships, which largely have failed because they do not involve the communities, they do not involve civil society, to recognizing that this has to be done all together in multi-stakeholder partnerships that do involve civil society alongside the private sector and government. So firstly, closer collaboration. Secondly, we must have an explicit focus on communal solutions. And I think the various telecentre initiatives that have taken place in Sri Lanka in recent years, village telecentres, communal telecentres, telecentres in religious establishments, are a shining example of the way that that can be achieved. My point here is simple. It is not about the individual, it is about the community, and the Commonwealth means just that. It means common prosperity, common good, and common happiness. That is what we in the Commonwealth strive to deliver for the interests and benefits of all of our peoples. Closer collaboration, a focus on communal solutions. Thirdly, what can computer scientists and the computer industry do? And my message here is again an easy one to say, but incredibly difficult to deliver. As scientists, as technicians, we are brilliant at developing new technology. But we do still just about have a choice in what we can do our research on, what we can develop. We have a choice in whether it is to make ourselves vast fortunes, to enable global corporations to generate profits to their shareholders. Or we can listen to the child on the street. And in many countries where I work, that child is being beaten by a policeman. Or a young woman who is being raped or selling her body so that she can earn a living. We can listen to their voices. And we, with our wisdom, with our technology, with our science, we can seek to make a technical difference to their lives. You're a brilliant group of people. You have immense skills. Many of you, if not most of you, have already used those skills in serving the interests of your country. I hope we can walk together in finishing that mission, but also in using those skills and expertise to those living in parts of the world very, very much less fortunate than Sri Lanka. Fourthly, and this is my penultimate theme, I believe that we must have an open and transparent dialogue between the different communities about some of the very difficult decisions that still remain unresolved. So if the computer scientists are working very much on the technical solutions, we do need the social and political and economic minds to work together on what in many ways are even more challenging issues. Issues around internet governance, issues around data and privacy. Is not every system hackable after all? Interests around security, security of states, security of our businesses, security of our loved ones. And I guess some people from Sri Lanka here were in Net Mundial in Brazil earlier this year. And on Thursday, when we finish here, there is another meeting largely driven, I think, by the interests of ICANN, but in taking forward the Net Mundial agenda with the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. In my understanding, there was going to be a debate at the IGF in Istanbul, and I'm sure there will be many lively people from Sri Lanka who will be there, who will carry that agenda and discussion forward. But we must be open, we must be transparent in all of the difficult agendas. And again, I applaud some of the initiatives here in Sri Lanka that have moved in that direction. Finally, and a danger in giving a speech near the end, is that some of the things you want to say have already been said. I'm very glad this one hasn't, so I can bring it anew. But we have to have greater concern with sustainability. And I'm tempted to ask how many people here got their phone that they now have in their pocket this year, and then how many last year, and how many 5 years ago? Well, my phone that I regularly use, and again, it's an old Nokia. It still works. It's wonderful. You can take the battery out so you can't be tracked wherever you go in the world. Yes, okay, I do carry this as well, but for different purposes. But the difference, our technologies, by and large, are pretty unsustainable. They're designed and built to be unsustainable, not to last. We have to get new versions of software. Think of the energy demands of data centers. Think of the costs of putting communication satellites up into the atmosphere and beyond. So I do believe that if we're truly going to design, use, encourage these incredible technologies to make the difference that they can make to the world, we have to pay much, much greater attention to the question of sustainability. Let me now close. I'd like to, and I'm sure you will all join me in doing this, thank the conference chair, Damit Hetihiwa, and his organizing committee for bringing us together. Will you please join me in a big round of applause for all of the organizing committee? And I'd like to thank the people who've put on this opening ceremony, the as ever wonderful Sri Lankan dancers, so I think they need a great round of applause. They have brought us together. Many of you in the audience will know each other. Take the opportunity to make new friends. I think exciting things in science happen with my notion of serendipitous rigor. We have to be rigorous in enabling serendipity to happen, because that's where exciting innovations happen. And once that serendipity has taken place, that sitting next to somebody you don't know and coming up with a brilliant new solution, we have to be rigorous in making that solution be relevant to the lives of the poorest and the marginalized. Thank you for bringing us together. Now it is up to us to use this occasion, to use these few privileged days when we can spend time in each other's company, to make a difference, to dream new dreams, and to work to create an inclusive Commonwealth where ICTs are indeed used to benefit all, from the greatest to the least. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to speaking with some slides and illustrations to those of you who still want to be here at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning. Let's have a wonderful conference. Thank you.